In today's video, I'm going to talk about this Gigabyte RX 7800 XT gaming OC. It is a slightly more premium version than the reference card from AMD that I talked about in my previous video, which generally means that it should be a bit faster, it should be a bit cooler, and it should be a bit more expensive. But if we look at a few different shops at the moment, that price premium can be very small depending on where you live. And some shops in the US are even selling it for $500, which is the MSRP and which is what you need to pay for the simpler reference model as well. So let's check it out, let's talk about its performance, and let's see if this custom RX 7800 XT is the one to get or not. Let's begin. The Gigabyte Gaming OC is a large 3-fan card. It is just over 30 centimeters long, almost 3 slots thick, and about 13 centimeters deep, which makes it much larger than the AMD reference model. It is also about 200 grams heavier, and it does feel very well built and very sturdy thanks to its metal backplate. It has the same black-gray color scheme that we've seen on other gaming OC models from Gigabyte, which I think is perfectly fine, it looks nice, and it is very easy to combine it with most motherboards and most cases on the market. When it comes to features, you do get a fan stop feature, just like on the reference card, and this one comes with a dual BIOS switch, which you can use to swap between the OC and the quiet BIOS. And for those of you who like a lot of RGB, this one doesn't have that much, only the logo lights up. It requires two 8-pin power connectors to power it up, and I really do like the Gigabyte added indicator lights to alert you if there are any problems regarding the power. And in the back, you get two HDMI 2.1 connections and two DisplayPort 2.1 connections, while the reference card has 3 display ports and only 1 HDMI connection, so this might be relevant to some of you. Now, before we look at this particular model, let's just do a very quick recap of the 7800 XT in case you missed my previous video. Now, on 1080p, the 7800 XT gets you 120 FPS or more in almost every game of the 33 titles we tested. There are a couple of exceptions like Starfield and Microsoft Flight Simulator that sit just a little bit below that, but those are running into CPU limitations and they won't really run that much better if you buy a more expensive GPU. On 1440p, you would generally get a 100 FPS plus experience, with a couple of exceptions in the 70 to 90 FPS range. But most of those recent games will include FSR as well, so if you want some more FPS, you can just enable upscaling. So generally speaking, the 7800 XT will be a very capable 1440p card now and in the years to come. It is not really marketed as a 4K card, but we did test it and the results on this resolution are a bit mixed. The majority of games ran comfortably at 60 FPS or more, but the 7800 XT did start to show some weaker results, with some games going down to 40s or even 30s. Now, generally speaking, you can get most of those titles above 60 FPS using FSR yet again, but if you're really interested in playing all of the latest games on a 4K resolution, I would just consider getting a higher position graphics card instead. Compared to the 6800 XT, the reference 7800 XT was only 3% faster on average, which isn't that much, and to me, it is kind of disappointing for a product with a similar name that came out 3 years later. Compared to the 4060 Ti, however, the 7800 XT looks great. The 4060 Ti is a bit cheaper, but it's not a huge price difference in this price class, and getting 40% more performance is a big deal, in my opinion. If we compare it to the 4070, the reference 7800 XT was about 5% faster on 1440p, which is nice as the 4070 is typically more expensive. However, power efficiency is on Nvidia's side, and for some of you that don't game too much or you pay very little for power in your region, the efficiency might not matter one bit. But for some of us that pay a lot for electricity, AMD's higher power use might be a deal breaker. But let's see how this Gigabyte fits in. If we look at the average clock speed, the AMD reference card came in at 2360 MHz, while the Gigabyte was at 2540 MHz. So there is a pretty large 180 MHz gap between the two models. In games on 1080p resolution, the difference in actual FPS isn't that large. It performs either the same or very slightly better in majority of games, but in some titles we do see a difference of more than 5%. On average, there's a little under 3% between these two cards on this resolution. On 1440p, Gigabyte's higher clock speeds start to show a little bit more. Most games do show about a 4% lead or more, sometimes going up to 10%, which is a significant improvement. On average, there is just over 4% between these two cards. And on 4K resolution, it is again about 4% between them on average, which is enough to call it faster. But if we look at the actual FPS numbers, 4% is not going to make those games that did 30 to 40 FPS before significantly more playable. Still, a 4% difference between a reference card and a factory overclocked card is very rare nowadays. And in all recent NVIDIA launches, I haven't seen a difference that was larger than 1 or very, very rarely 2% between the slowest and the fastest model on the market. So this is a very good performance difference for Gigabyte here. And when you do add that percentage to the previous comparison with the RTX 4070, you're now looking at about 10% of a difference in favor of AMD. Looking at thermal performance, the larger Gigabyte card does really well, as you would expect. It is either slightly cooler than AMD reference card at a slightly lower noise level, or very much cooler at a higher but still somewhat reasonable noise level. So it is definitely the more efficient design between the two. Technically, a hotspot of just under 90 degrees is comfortably under AMD's limit, so both profiles are very viable to use depending on your preference when it comes to noise. So I do want to give some credit to Gigabyte here because they finally added 2 fan profiles to a dual BIOS card that are actually different and usable. Plus, the fan ramp is also much better. Now, I've talked about it a lot in a very critical way in some of my previous Gigabyte GPU reviews because they had really obnoxious and aggressive fan spin-ups, and I'm very pleased to say that this card doesn't do that at all and definitely offers a much more, let's say, pleasant experience overall. Now, naturally, all this extra performance comes with a cost of higher power consumption. This card uses about 13% more power for that 4% performance increase. And yes, that is expected with an overclocked card, but it does make the total cost of power even worse. It adds another 34 watts on top of the reference card power usage, which means that the gap with the 4070 is now about 90 watts. Again, with a low power cost and limited game time, this is something that many of you can completely ignore, especially since this card can be about $100 cheaper than the base model 4070. But if you are someone who pays 35 to 50 cents per kilowatt hour and you game a lot, this card will end up costing you a lot more in the long run. So keep that in mind. In the end, if the reference RX 7800 XT didn't make sense for you because of that power efficiency, I don't think that the Gigabyte Gaming OC version will change that fact. But if the extra power draw is not a concern for you, and all that matters is that the 7800 XT is faster and cheaper than the RTX 4070, then the Gigabyte Gaming OC is actually the more attractive option, and you should definitely get it over the base reference model. It looks more impressive, it is significantly faster, and it runs cooler and quieter. Now, that is all I have for this video, but before I go, let's check out the sponsor of this video. This video is brought to you by Seasonic and their brand new Vertex power supplies. These fully modular power supplies are extremely efficient and very quiet due to their fan design and their hybrid fan mode that stops the fans completely under 40% load. They come with a variety of connections for any kind of systems you have in mind, including the new 12-volt high-power cable for the latest RTX graphics cards, and as a little bonus, you get a cozy 10-year-long warranty. Check them out using the links in the description below. I hope this video was helpful enough, and I'm also finishing the RX 7700 video as well as a video dedicated to undervolting this 7800 XT card. So if you're interested in those, do consider clicking that subscribe button so you don't miss them. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!